hot. There's that. And why? I swear to God.
Pew pew! Choo choo!
Discord string kits. Why do you do this? Voice widget. There it goes. Okay. So yeah, hey chat, or hey stream. Basically, as you can see in the chat, Green is off this week because her sister is getting married, and so she had a bit of family obligation to go, and I think it was the bridal party, bridal shower. It's not as fun as the bachelorette party, which is what I keep, I just keep defaulting to thinking is what's going on, which just, you know, hey, it's not that. So it's just Beard and I for this week. So obviously we're not going to do top 3. We will be doing top 3 next week when we get back together for the extra lore. We are still also trying to finalize when we're going to do I think we're going to try to do an extra stream / episode on Tuesday or Wednesday night, I believe. Have to double check with Green on what we finalized on that for the new information from the draw, I believe is that the quest that's dropping on Tuesday for the last word, or as Bungie refers to it, the hand cannon shaped elephant in the room. So, No Man's Sky, yeah. Extra Lore poll is up and running this weekend, so I believe Beard wants Near Automata, Potatoes calling for No Man's Sky. I know that we added Warhammer back on there. Couple good options on there. So definitely vote on that. That's going to be in the Discord server. As has kind of is becoming the norm, we're not going to run any of the canned audio clips for this live stream. I will be editing those in off or afterwards when I'm getting everything ready for the audio files. So keep that in mind. Other than that, I'm trying to think. I do actually have the ability to, or didn't I have something sort of written up to talk about once we start the episode for what I've been working on, that I'm kind of excited to get everyone aware of. But yeah, Beard, I don't know. Do you have anything before we jump in?
No, not really.
Okay.
Outside of, the stuff that I could talk about from today and how today went, but
well, hey, look, when you try out new things, sometimes it doesn't go as everyone wants it to go. I think
sometimes they make
gently
a causal loop, which causes them to DDoS themselves.
Oh my God, yeah, I saw that tweet and I was like, oh, man, if that's legitimately what was going on, I feel so bad. Because to be fair, that is the point of a stress test. Like, it's to find out those kinks that you don't know exist.
These aren't going to be the servers they run on anyway.
Yeah, I saw something about that because they said something about
These
like
are-
they were running into issues that didn't exist during didn't exist during the internal testing. So
yeah,
like,
basically because BioWare's servers aren't ready. That's all that it comes down to. So they've been quick moving them over to EA's servers, and in the interim, that has caused several different problems to kind of pop up. But it's just been a causal loop on themselves where they continue to go ahead and every account that basically was signed up and is either in standby or is even like semi-logged into Origin is trying to ping the server. And even some of them that don't seem to be online whatsoever seem to be nailing it.
God, man.
Basically Black Flag. It just comes down to preparedness, and EA showed, quite frankly, that they don't know what the hell they're doing anymore.
So is Origin their platform?
Origin is their
like
Steam.
okay. So that's like their Blizzard or their what is it? It's not Blizzard. Is it Blizzard Net? Is that Activision's?
Yeah, I gotta say the Blizzard.net launcher.
Oh
Same
man.
kind of idea. Yeah, that's the joke. Like EA has yet to really have a very
EA
good
being EA. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is, I mean, like, to be fair, it sucks because this is the first impression that a lot of people are going to have of this game, and it's not. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not fair to the game because people are getting frustrated and they haven't even gotten into the game yet. It's like you're starting off on a bad foot, and it's not even the game's fault. Like I've heard from people from people who have been able to get into the game. They're like, I mean, it's good, but a lot of them are looking at it through the tent of like it took forever to get in, and it's just
Yeah, I went away for a good 4 hours and I came back to try to log in, and I was able to, and I've been able to play free play, but that's as far as I was able to get.
Did you have the problem with the blurry faces?
No, but
Which
that
is
was
the
hilarious.
That was the funniest clip. The faces of EA. It's all the face.
Yeah. No,
I was like, oh
I really,
man.
Yeah, I just really, I would love to support the game, and I think that it'll end up doing fine for the most part. But if this is going to be how things will be in the long run, or what they will be at their worst, then I worry about giving it any kind of support whatsoever. I cannot stand EA for any fiber of my being for what they have done for the industry, and where Bethesda was getting so much criticism. Immediately now everybody is reminded why EA is the absolute worst.
I mean, it's good for Bethesda, right? Like,
I mean, it takes a little bit of pain off of them for 76, I guess.
76. Oh man. Yeah, at least Anthem. At least
zombies.
Anthem's not deleting itself.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, Doom, because I haven't been hyped about this one at all. Like I've been trying to keep myself like completely tempered about it, pretty well unbiased, and like I'm still trying to figure out where people really jumped onto the fact that it even looked good. Like that's part of my problem. Because I have either played games that are extremely similar to it, I'm invested in Destiny or something else, but like just for me in general, it's a really, really hard sell. And just having the BioWare name on it, especially for how many people have been lost and for how they have split that developer in twain, I don't honestly have any care that it's by BioWare. They're not the same developer they once were.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like I'm hoping I hope that it works because it's another opportunity for, the gaming community as a whole to get into, like, I mean, I hope it's a great game. Like I genuinely do. But personally, I'm just like, it's another shared world shooter that is focusing on social play, and it's just, I'm like, that's not where, like, I don't have enough time to invest in another one of those.
No.
Which, I mean, that's just me. Like, that's just 100%.
Yep.
That's just me. That I'm not, and like I said, I still wish that I'm hoping that it goes well. I hope that people find. I mean, it's like The Division. Like, it's I have no interest really in Division, but at the same time, I also really like seeing all the stuff that's coming out of the community around that game because it's been pretty cool. Like, it's really cool watching all the creators and stuff band together on doing different things and different, projects, and the cool things that they are coming out with, like all the cosplay stuff and the hilarious memes that have been coming out. And, just watching people get excited about stuff like that is always, to me, is always a great thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, Anthem, it looks like it has an intriguing story. I mean, like I'm not gonna lie. I'm interested in seeing a summary view of what the story is in Anthem, like the whole concept of the Anthem of Creation or whatever it is that is the namesake of the game. Like, I think that's a really cool. I think it's a cool concept. I definitely don't. I think people are starting to realize that it's kind of comparing apples to oranges when it's like, oh, this is gonna be a Destiny killer or whatever they're calling it now. It's like no, it's really the best thing that I saw someone was like, someone pointed out, it's like Destiny is a space fantasy or a science fantasy RPG-esque with really tight controls on shooting and PvP and stuff like that, whereas Anthem is like more of a, it's not an augmented, but it's more of a ARG, if anything, and it's much more, it doesn't have PvP. There's no PvP at all, and it's much more loosey-goosey as far as controls go. It's a completely different beast in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and pins, that's exactly it. It's like, I mean, I have to tip my hat to Destiny for that piece because that's exactly right, because it used to be everything was a Halo killer. I mean, even games that weren't even first-person shooters were like, this is a Halo killer. I'm like, this is a racing game. Like, this isn't what, like, people can play more than one game, guys. Like, that's. I was watching.
I'm gonna say the same is said about World of Warcraft for all these
right.
years
Oh
too.
God.
And
yeah.
Just I come from the generation of that, like 5 or 10 years, whatever, of gaming that looks at stuff like that and goes, please shut up.
Yeah,
it's just like, you have no reason to say anything like that. You don't understand how gaming even works at that point. You don't know that people enjoy different facets or otherwise. Like, what is wrong with you? And there is a point where you can frankly sit down and say, oh, this overhyped game isn't for me. That's weird. I wonder why. Well, maybe it's because you have this thing called taste. And maybe your taste isn't the same as somebody else. Isn't that a damn thought?
Wait, you mean we can have opinions without... Yeah.
Don't get me started.
Oh, man.
Actually, I guess too late, but still.
Oh. Alright. Let's see. So... that is that. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll jump in. And like I said, we're not going to have any of the canned audio. I'll be putting that in post show, so we'll just have a little brief moments of quiet for those sections. I will be kind of using audio cues behind the scenes to kind of help bookmark certain parts. So if you hear some random stuff, chat or Beard, if you hear some random stuff, just basically ignore it. It's just me being lazy and bookmarking stuff. But yeah, so if you're Beard, if you're good, we can go ahead and jump into it.
Yep, I'm good. Okay.
Welcome back for episode 156 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on January 25th over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Our topic for tonight's episode is going to be a look at the legacy of yore. But first, let's run through a quick introduction of those on the show for tonight. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86. And basically rounding out the usual team, we have our good buddy, the lore content cop himself, Beard Grizzly. Beard, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm here, especially after today. I'm here.
As most of you have probably realized, as most of you are very, very acute or astute on the realization, Green is not here this week. She is out because of a bridal shower in the family. Mm-hmm. I believe her sister is getting married, so she had to go back home and give support. I keep thinking that it's a bachelorette party, and she keeps reminding me that it's a bridal shower, so I keep thinking that it's a different type of party, but that's where my brain is. So yes, so we don't have a community question this week. We are going to be trying to figure out a time to jump on by the time you guys who are listening to the audio recording, which should be Monday morning if everything goes well. The drop of the new quest, The Draw, will be releasing on Tuesday, so it'll be quote-unquote tomorrow by the time you hear this. We are going to be trying to find a time for Green, Beard, and myself to sit down and either record during a game stream or record another episode over on Twitch for our kind of thoughts on what has been officially released at that point. As far as the lore entries, I believe we are expecting 2 books to come out, which are going to be Letters of the Renegade and Book of Unmaking. They have not been released yet, as far as I am aware, so we won't be discussing those, even though they are very, very relevant to tonight's topic. We're going to try to hold off on discussing those as much as possible because they are not technically canon just yet, and so we try to respect that. I will say I am very excited for them to get dropped. If the version that I have is the version that we're getting, it's amazing, and I'm really excited to see where that goes as far as in game and also in the overall story. Let's see real quick. Anything else? I'm trying to think. Oh, I did have one other, actually kind of really big announcement. So as most of you in the Destiny community are probably aware, Guardian Radio has kind of taken a step back and has gone off air. The group is still definitely around. Mark is kind of doing his own thing with the different various entertainment podcasts, and then Mesa's obviously doing his own thing, and I believe K-Dub is still doing his own thing as well. So they're definitely all still around. They will be coming back from time to time for episodes of Guardian Radio. But that being said, the Guardian Radio network has kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of disbanded. It's not really existent anymore. And so what that kind of presents for us is an opportunity that basically allows us an opportunity to move into a space that gives us the option or the opportunity to create a place for us and others who enjoy lore as a whole, to an area to grow as content creators. And so in that vein, what I have done with Green and a couple of the other creators who have already kind of been a part of what we have going on called the Lore Network, we have revamped the website of the Lore Network. I'm going to be taking a lot more of an active role over there, pushing to kind of grow that site. And what the Lore Network I really kind of want to see it is in the same vein that Focus Fire Chat has developed into really for a lack of a better term, a safe spot for people from across the Destiny community to come together to discuss the Destiny lore. And, with the extra lore, we have definitely tried to kind of we've dipped our toes in the water, if you will, on different content or different games. The Lore Network really is going to be a repository or a hub to help people not just find other creators, but also help creators find other creators, to kind of help build a community both for creators and for, you know, an audience, as a way to help kind of showcase what's out there. And so our idea is that we want to build a spot so that other people can go to the website and find, you know, different content like Beard's YouTubes, or Wally or Sir Wallen's, you know, YouTube channel. Like, there's different things that they cover. We try to showcase, you know, hey, if you're looking for this particular topic, these are the creators that we have, that we know of, that we work with, that we're friends with, that we, you know, that help us, we help them, all that. And really behind the scenes, what it's also an option, or also an opportunity for us, is as creators, it allows us to be kind of like pinging each other and kind of, you know, growing ourselves and helping us fact check ourselves behind the scenes, which is, it's honestly for especially for story analysis, is really helpful, because that helps everyone kind of have a more accurate view of what's going on. That being said, what we're going to be doing is we're actually opening up the Lore Network to anyone. So predominantly it is going to be kind of more articles. So if you have a game that you're very passionate about that's not Destiny, we were kind of talking about that before the show started. If you have a game that's really, you know, or anything, if you have a movie like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, big deal right now. If you have stuff that you want to talk about that you don't really have a place to talk about it, and you want to put your thoughts in an article and have us host those articles, we will put them up and we will push them out to the audiences really that we have, because as we get more people, you know, in there as creators to kind of help each other as creators, that'll also obviously give us an opportunity to kind of showcase your guys' stuff as well, which is kind of what we were doing a little bit with the Focus Fire website. We're probably going to be ultimately taking the Focus Fire website and merging it into the Lore Network's website. I am working behind the scenes right now with WordPress, is where we host everything right now. I'm working with them to try to see how to not impact you guys as consumers or as the audience. You will still be able to use the URL focusfirechat.com, but that's going to redirect basically into the lorenetwork.com. So basically what I really want right now, what I'd really like to hear is if you guys can check out the lorenetwork.com, let us know what your thoughts are on the website, the layout of the website, what you would like to see, what would make it easier for you to use. What would you actually, you know, what would you care to see on that website? Because right now we have a really good foundation for it, but we want to know, you know, for you guys, what is it that you are wanting to find? Would it be like, do you want like a more prominent Rolodex of content creators? Do you want more articles? Do you want more, you know, what are you looking for? What can we do to help you find stuff that, you know, you're looking for more easily? And that's for you as readers or as consumers of content. If you are out there and you want to get into content creation and you feel like there's, you know, I don't have a platform to stand on or whatever, let us know, because we're also going to be trying to promote people and kind of help get people out there and get them started with their own thoughts and get them, you know, a place to kind of talk about their thoughts about things as well. So definitely reach out to us. We are going to, I don't know if we're going to necessarily open up a new Discord server just yet. We're still kind of working out the mechanics of that, or the logistics of that particular piece, but it is in conversation right now. Right now, we're still doing most of what we are doing through the Focus Fire Discord at this moment. But you know, obviously, we're all on Twitter. We're also obviously on Discord. So if you want to reach out there, and then obviously if you want to send us an email, we still have the focusfirechat@gmail address is the best place to get a hold of us if you want to email. So that all being said, we obviously don't have a community question this week because Green's out. We will be working on getting one for maybe the next episode. Next episode is going to be an extra lore episode, so it's not necessarily going to be something that we might get, but we might try to get. She might try to get something out for the draw review. But yeah, so with that all being said, let's jump through the intro notes real quick, and then Beard and I will get right into the topic. All right, so for this week, I don't really have anything particular set aside for Lost lore, but I do actually want to call out in a way. I would kind of want it to be a focus on the Grimoire anthology, which is called A Dark Mirror, the volume 1, I guess you would say. There's a couple really kind of introductory summaries from the lore publication there that really are, they just spring to mind when we talk about this particular thing. And one of them is the introduction to A Book of Sorrow, and the summary is, it goes, quote, "What is this violent ritual, these tales of suffering where all ends in a feast of maggots and rot laid on a wormwood table for gods to feast on misery? But is not the light also served by savage sacrifice, accepted wounds, blood spilled in the dust of distant worlds? Life and death and life and death and life and death are locked in a battle that never ends. The cycle is the same. The pain is the same. We eliminate those who oppose the light. They annihilate those who do not worship the dark. In the end, only sorrow remains." So that's the summary or the introduction to A Book of Sorrow in the Grimoire anthology, A Dark Mirror. And really the reason I kind of wanted to call that out is because it does a great level of justice to the legacy of the man known to many of us as Dredgen Yor. The same heroic titan whose name is protected by not only the Vanguard and the Consensus, but by his own actions, really. And I know when I was... So if anything for Lost Lore, I want to call out again the fact that, yes, Dredgen Yor is a titan, not a hunter. That titan name was Rezel Azir. I was kind of just doing a litmus test, if you will, of Reddit for, any recent conversation about Dredgen Yor and the shadows of Yor and all that. And apparently this is still a very contentious subject. Apparently this is still a giant argument as far as who Dredgen Yor was. I don't really know why, but
this is also where I insert the
yeah, I don't really understand why, but yeah, so
you say we got confirmation from the writer? You don't say.
Chat, you went to Reddit, first mistake. No, I mean Reddit, okay, for the record, Reddit has I can't defend it too much, but it does have good areas. And if nothing else, it is a good litmus test for what a lot of the general population is what is on their minds, right? Regardless of if what's on the minds of the many is something you roll your eyes at or not. That's not the point. It is a good. Yeah, I don't know how much more I can defend that. But the fact is that there are still a lot of people who are posting about, who is Dredgen Yor, who is Dredgen Vale, who is Dredgen Bane, all these different shadows, and who are they? And it's a kind of a question. There's a lot of assumptions. There's a lot of, to be blunt, misinformation. And so I think that's kind of one of the first things I do kind of want to call out about Yor is we've done, I think this is the fourth. Hang on, let me make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be the fourth specific episode that we do about Dredgen Yor. And I do just want to reiterate that Dredgen Yor was a titan, and the entire point of everything that was put into game that was hinting at his being a hunter was done with the purpose of misdirection. We have this confirmed. He is trying to misdirect your attention from who he actually is. So it's not just the vanguard. It's not just the consensus. It's not just the speaker who is, hiding this information from you. Yor himself is also protecting his name out of a sense of, whether that's misplaced pride, whether that is hubris of some kind. There is a degree through which he views the name Rezel Azir as something of a light on the top of a hill, and it needs to stay that way. And you can argue there too whether there is a degree of the man who he was still left, or if he was using that to, we do know about Dredgen Yor that he did appreciate consuming hope. He loved building up hope, if for no other reason than to destroy it. Nothing was more delicious to him, he says. And so he could also be using it as a way to kind of being like, oh yeah, look, here's this name dangling, this bait star, if you will, out and waiting for people to fixate on it just to swoop in and, at the last minute destroy that hope within them personally. That's also a possibility. It just depends on how twisted he actually was in the end. But that all is to be said, he was a Titan. I think that's about as blunt as I can be with that particular piece of information.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Protect his name to give them hope. Nothing dies like hope. Yeah, Wicked in chat. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of one of my personal theories, is that he used it as a way to build up the currency that even in his twisted state, he still viewed as currency. Because we see that with Rezel, right? Like from the very beginning with Rezel, he views hope as a currency. I mean, we've talked about this. I think, what was it? Was it the episode? Was it last episode or the episode before that where you mentioned that, Beard, about Rezel, viewing hope as what brings tomorrow?
I think it was the episode before, because what were we talking about? Something kind of spawned it up. And if not that, maybe it was the Black Armory Papers.
I think it might have been the Black Armory Papers.
Yeah, because we were dealing with some of the topics that kind of lace back to it, and some of the writing that was otherwise put together with the person that they refer to, and how hope was brought up within that same exact sentencing, and so on. And yeah, because I could go along with that entire thinking the whole time. Anyway.
Well, and I mean, I think the the kind of to kind of move into what the legacy of Yor, if you will, kind of is like, let's look at, the tragedy of the shadows, right? The tragedy of the shadows of Yor is, I mean, it's to really kind of sum it up. I kind of want to read the note from the Destiny audio or Grimoire. I keep wanting to say audio Grimoire, Destiny Grimoire anthology. They have an excerpt that is from Callum. Now, I think this is one of those things that this is actually one of the new pieces of information that we get from the anthology. A lot of that printed anthology, to be fair, is information that we've already had, but it's just kind of reorganized, if you will, into kind of a more cohesive thing. Big shout out to Matt and the team over at Bungie for the compilation of that, because it does kind of direct your understanding of how it's to be read. And the excerpt, they have kind of like summary excerpts at the beginning of each chapter, really. And there's about, I think, if I remember off the top of my head, there's 3 chapters, and this is the one that's called Shadows Beyond. And the Shadows Beyond excerpt says, "In the beginning, I towed the line. My ghost brought me up out of the long black, led me to a gun, told me I was a warrior. She said I was supposed to protect humanity. I told her I didn't see much reason in fighting for people who had never given one damn about me. She said I was special. I told her if that was true, she wouldn't have found my bones in the back end of nowhere. Didn't know who I'd been before she woke me up, but I knew enough to know I was no hero. Her rules didn't make much sense to me. I was supposed to do all the bleeding, all the dying. I was the one pulling the trigger. I was the one who couldn't close my eyes without seeing one of 1,000 things I'd rather forget. Nightmares that turned into horrors on planets that weren't my own that turned into more nightmares. The rest didn't have to do anything but be saved. So I started thinking. Then I started reading. I'm no warlock, but it didn't take a warlock to track down the stories of the Risen who'd taken a hold of the dark and made it his own. The man who had gone down into the tunnels and burned down the horrors, took their remains and wore them like a king, stripped away the petals of the rose like broken shards. They say he felt a corruption, that he lost himself and had to be put down, that the man with the golden gun is the hero who saved the day. I don't believe it. I'm not the only one either. Not many of us left now, but we've walked in his dust. We know everything he ever did. We understand what you don't. He wasn't the demon the stories made him out to be. He was showing us the way. My ghost doesn't talk much these days. When she does, she calls me by my old name, Callum. I don't answer to that anymore. So, this is actually a really cool look at the situation that we see from the character that we kind of get introduced to when he dies. Our really only introduction to Callum up until this point has been a entry from, I believe it is oh god, I just blanked on it. It's Shadow on the, I think it's Shadow on the Wall, right?
Yeah, there's that one that we see, and then also in the game when you're going for the Malfeasance quest, the climax to the Corrupted Strike, you actually apparently find this ghost that was Callum's, and you see you
shadow.
see Callum's shadow basically pasted on the wall like it was nuclear blast that just went off.
And is that where we hear Callum's last name? In the strike? Because so. I could not find it in the entries, and I've seen a lot of people refer to it as Callum's soul, and I could not find it in the entries of it. So it's either so the two entries that we have Callum on right now in game are Shadow on a Wall and Artifacts and Old Friends. Both of these are from the Renegade, which a character named the Renegade, which a lot of people kind of are pretty accurately, I think, assuming is Shin. And this is Drifter's Gambit is the book that I was thinking here. And they're both labeled a Renegade's Observations of a Drifter. Shadow on the Wall really kind of sets the stage for what Beard was just explaining, but it's from Shin's perspective. And it's basically the Renegade confronting Callum right after Callum had killed his ghost. So Callum was actually the one that was responsible for his ghost. And I believe it was with a thorn, right? That's kind of at least that's right. A tool carved from the jagged spikes fired from a weapon I shall not name. I kind of read that as being a I don't know what you want to call it. It's technically the slug that Thorn fired back in D1, if anyone remembers that.
Yep.
Oh, Dino did say Drifter gives the name at the start of the strike, Callum's soul. Perfect. Yeah. So yeah, so that's Callum.
Recorded. I would just have to look back on it.
Yeah, and I don't believe we know his title as a shadow. The other two known shadows we do have, these are Dredge and Vale and Dredge and Bane. We've actually known Bane and Vale. We've had information from them since Destiny 1. Bane is definitely becoming more prevalent. He's definitely the source of a lot of information, it looks like, going forward as well as kind of existing now. And this is because Bane was a character named Tebben Gray. We don't know much about like classification or race about Gray. Hang on real quick. Yeah, sorry, chat was talking about Bane. We don't know much about Tebben other than the fact that Tebben was a very studious keeper of notes, which we will touch on. Like I said, when I so want to talk about it because Book of the Unmaking is like really thanks to Gray's character, Tebben's character, that's going to be the prevalent from what I've seen, and it's so good. I'm hoping that what we have is what we get because it's so good. Vale, however, we do know a bit more about Vale. Vale was a male. We don't know what race. Most people seem to assume that Vale was a hunter. And I haven't seen anything in the entries that point to that. There's a few that kind of, I believe the closest that would come to kind of pointing that is Ghost Fragment Thorn. Hang on real quick. Ghost Fragment Thorn 5. And the reason why I think that is where a lot of people kind of assume that that's Vale talking is that it's a single person giving kind of a soliloquy or a monologue. And it's labeled as a unknown hunter. However, as I was digging more into the ghost fragments, as I was digging more into them, there were a couple other ghost fragments that had the tags for Vale or Dredgen Vale and Dredgen Bane, but were not those two speaking. And so there could be the argument made that those tags are simply kind of like category tags for the audio files or the audio transcripts that the ghost fragments represent. Because there is I think it's Ghost Fragment, the Cathedral or Cathedral of Dust. I want to say that's the one where there's a hunter and a titan speaking about how they ran into Orsa and his group. So, it's just one of those things. It's like, I think it's a safe assumption, but it is still at this point an assumption is all I think. But that being said, Vale definitely is responsible for the recreation of Thorn. Vale put together a process known as I believe it was the Rite of Cleansing is how we got it in, what was that? That was in Rise of Iron, right? I believe that was the updated version of A Light in the Dark, which was the original quest that we used to get Thorn. So the Rite of Cleansing was established by Orsa to create new thorns for use in the Crucible and to then further develop the Shadows. Ultimately, their ultimate end goal was to develop the Shadows into an equivalent of the Weapons of Sorrow, which is where we see this kind of in Ghost Fragment Thorn 5, where he kind of is talking about the evolution of them into something more. But really, I mean, so I kind of want to talk about like what the Shadows, because the Shadows really are, to be honest, that is kind of the brunt of the legacy of Yore, is the Shadows of Yore. They've taken on the name Dredgen, and they've taken it on in a way because it's arguable about are they taking it on to further the works of Yore, or are they taking it on to harness the power that Yore introduced without falling into darkness? And I think that really kind of depends on the individual, because Callum, or whoever Callum, or whichever Dredgen Callum becomes, Callum definitely fell. I don't think a lot of people would argue that Callum had fallen into darkness. He sacrifices his own ghost, and ultimately doesn't have a lot of redeeming qualities from what we've seen so far. Whereas though, Bane or Tebben almost seems to be more intellectually kind of plumbing the depths. I haven't seen anything from Tebben that kind of hints that Tebben was really as far gone as Orsa and Callum. Orsa kind of seems kind of on the same path as Callum, especially with the arguments with Jagged Purpose and the Rite of Cleansing, because there's a couple quest steps there. The Harvest of the Lesser, Feast upon the Light, Cleansed by the Light, and Where It Began are the quest steps from the Rise of Iron, and each one of those comes with a quote specific to that particular aspect of the recreation of Thorn from Orsa. And as you kind of get further into the quest, they definitely get a little bit more twisted, as you can kind of see like the darkness kind of worming its way into their their process there. And then when you get to Ghost Fragment Thorn 5, he comes out and he basically refers to the Shadows of Yore as new weapons of sorrow. So, you know, Orsa is another one of those that's kind of like, you know, like I don't really know where he falls in the spectrum. But I think Tebben of the three that we do know about, I think Tebben is probably the lightest of the three, whereas Callum is the darkest. I don't know, Beard, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was going to actually just say I pretty well agree with that idea, because it, unfortunately, of course, we're not digging into Book of the Unmaking, but I think that a lot of that is actually showcased in there too, assuming that all of it stays as it is, and the way that we kind of have it presented right now. But that being said, without digging into that too much, I do think that the way that even some of the early stuff with the two of them, Tebben and Orsa seemed like he was more the, I guess, the heavier fighter, if you will. He was a little on the darker side. Tebben has always seemed like the slightly better one of them in a way.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like he's out there for the value of the knowledge more than he is much else.
Tebben honestly kind of strikes me more as the warlock, which is weird because Orsa, I mean, like, so Orsa's the one that's arguably the hunter. Tebben definitely seems, and you like, it's to me, it's an interesting dynamic because of all the hunters and warlocks that we've seen in game, the warlocks have always been the ones that kind of go into the dark end. Like, you know, like we have Toland, we have Osiris, arguably. You know, they're kind of the ones that knowledge kind of drives them insane. Whereas Tebben's kind of, I don't know, from what we've seen so far with Tebben, he's not, or they are not 100% lost.
I don't think that relating them to Toland or Osiris is the best option, though.
Fair, yeah.
I would almost like maybe Toland, yes, but that's for a different reason. Warlocks embrace the idea of what it is they are looking into. If we look at the Void, for instance, they respect and kind of understand the path that they're going down when they look at the Void. But even Toland himself has commented on the Sunsinger and the path that presented for him previously as well. So Toland understands both sides of how the inner workings of it kind of goes. I would almost relate it back to somebody like Pajari or Ulantan. They actually think back a little bit more on like the heavier philosophies, if you will, of how either death works or how the symmetry works, and all of these either deal with light and dark a little bit more. They're more the understandings of where they are. Meanwhile, to me, that makes the most sense of where, like, the path and the order may go. For instance, just basing it off of that idea alone, Callum, to me, might be the Titan. He's the one that uses the power but doesn't fully understand it, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
It's the same thing as like what they talk about with the way that Disintegrate works on the Titan Defender out of D1,
which is still one of my favorite descriptions.
Yeah, they basically they use the same powers of the Void as what warlocks do when they use lifesteal, but they put it on the outside of themselves instead of taking that life force into them.
What do you think happens?
Yeah,
I love that card.
But then you end up having, I would almost say that Orsa would be the hunter, again, based on this assumption line of thinking, because they're afraid of the Void. They don't necessarily want to grab the bow, they don't necessarily want to work with it much, but after they start to kind of taste it, they start to be a little bit more okay with that idea. And I know I'm comparing everything to the Void, and that is obviously, of course, what we are not going down, but it's the dark power, or an assumed dark power, if you will, from what we know of within the universe, or kind of like a borderline idea. But that's, again, to me, kind of like where I'm sort of going with it. And then to get back to what I was talking about earlier, I would figure that Tebben would be the warlock, because that is effectively where you have somebody that understands what it is that they're looking into, and they respect it, and for respecting it, they are basically kind of masking or protecting themselves a little bit more. In quick relation, I think about people that hunt ghosts. As ghost hunters, you go ahead and try to protect yourself with the, as they say, armor of God and whatnot. It's the same kind of idea to kind of wrap it all together. Just to say, I understand where this is going. I understand what the implications of this may be. But how you understand it and how you approach it, of course, can drastically vary in how that difference in mannerism may fold. But anyway, that's where I'm kind of at with that. I think we might have an instance where we have all three classes available to us, barring the drifter and how that may end up going. But
and that's
again, I will leave those thoughts alone.
Well, but I mean, I think that is a good kind of segue into talking about the drifter a little bit too, because I've seen this also brought up is like, so one of the prevalent theories, again, kind of going back to Reddit, rip sanity, if you want to go down this rabbit hole, is that the drifter, apparently there's this theory, I don't agree with it, but I'm going to bring it to the light of day to kind of, let's see how it holds water. There's apparently a group that view the drifter as Dredge and Vale. Which, okay, I mean, to give it credit here, I have my own theory about who the drifter is. I don't.
It ain't that.
It's not. I don't think it's Vale. But I can see where that connection is made on a high level. I definitely can see that. Because the idea that Drifter is kind of the organizer and handing out titles of dredging with Gambit. He talks about his crew, which was, very arguably, if not specifically Shadows, very closely affiliated with Shadows. He is known by the Drifter's Gambit lore entries, as well as some of his own statements, to have formerly run with Shadows. And with the Malfeasant quest, we kind of learn that he actually does have a target on Shin's back a little bit as well. Now, that all being said, I think it goes back to the question, though, and Beard, I'm going to kind of ask you this to hear your thoughts. Do you think the Drifter is a Shadow, or do you think that he is just affiliated with the Shadow and is using them to serve his own needs?
Without giving too much of my theory away? Oh, that's tough.
Okay, I mean, like, do you? He is affiliated with the Shadows, like that part. I think, like, well, I think that's without question. Fair. That's there. But like, do you think that he is actually a dredgen, or do you think that he is something else?
I think he practices that old hunter's theory and theorem of being a storyteller. I think that overall he is somebody that effectively likes to spin yarns or give reason for why things are the way that they are. But I think that overall he is not somebody that we have seen or heard of previously. But I do think, and Viru kind of touched base on something a little bit too, a split personality theory kind of going on with the Drifter, I think is very true.
Okay.
It is actually something that's been kind of mulling through my head for a little while, but the high possibility that there are perhaps 3 residents as now we're dealing with different psychosis here. We're dealing with multiple personality disorder, which would actually explain quite a few things about a couple of guys that we've talked about previously with Dredge and Yor, and then also Rizal Azir. but it may also end up inflicting back on some other pieces that we've also thought of. Again, Tails, etc., of also looking on Shin Malfure, and then also looking at the Drifter. I'm having this large thought that at this point, Shin Malfure, Razilazir, and Dredgen Yor never existed. The events that may have created the Thorn could have possibly existed, or this weapon may have existed previously that was recovered from some dark means. I mean, quite frankly, we look at the Necrocosm. Necrocosm was built from Hive magic. We don't necessarily know that the entire origins of of Thorn come directly from that. There are tales and stories and mythos and bias that presents itself in this regard, and that's where this theory kind of presents itself. We see it from like one or two perspectives. And that's where I'm wondering if they didn't turn everything over for the Drifter to effectively have him be more like this, like he's dropping personalities, or is able to put them underneath for a while. Where like Dredgen Yor is effectively shut down, if you will, by Shin Malfure, but Shin Malfure is another personality within that's kind of conflicting with Yor and whatnot, and eventually wins. And it would also tie back to why Drifter knows exactly where Callum is, and then why he also has no idea why he's effectively now dead as well. There's just several things that just don't make a lot of sense that are actually tying back to this this different occupational idea of like multiple personality disorder or otherwise, and in some cases as well, the whole idea and interim, if you will. Some people will also have change in their minds with multiple personality disorder, where their voices and their mannerisms will change completely.
Yeah.
So if I look at something, somebody has already come back with me with the statement of, well, Callum sounds very different from Drifter. Doesn't mean a thing. The way that a voice can be treated or changed, you hear me with some of my impressions, quite frankly. I can do a fairly good impression of many different things. I can change my voice on the daily. I can go ahead and alter it to be how I want it to sound if I want to. It really comes down to what kind of conditioning I decide to do with my voice, or what I decide to change on that day, or how I decide to handle myself. If somebody is suffering from those disorders, then they're actually changing their ideas on the fly. They can change how they present and handle, etc., the way that they do. But this comes back to a couple main and key pieces that we will find in, again, the letters from a renegade, which are coming up soon, we assume.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, and it also goes back to some spare possibilities of like who or what, etc., things were previously. It also ties back to why the Vanguard. You'd have to figure the Vanguard know that he's there. It would tie back as to why they are okay with the Drifter being there, because they would see reason for him to be there, and they would rather him be close than going off on another damn fool crusade, as Obi-Wan might say. But that's just the main idea on like how I would at least kind of figure in that regard. There are so many different pieces that don't necessarily add up of like why the Drifter acts as he does, or why other characters kind of have acted, etc. I don't know. I like the theory. I know there's still some holes with it, but unless you know that somebody has multiple personality, it's extremely difficult to peg when something changes or alters. And until you see it in the act, it's almost impossible. Except for like how Drifter changes in this like bipolar mannerism in the way that he does, willing to give us so much information and then shift off to not. It's just he's a really weird character. And there has always been something off about him, but it's something that I trust about him. I think that would just be a really good like rabble point, just to kind of bring it all together and be like, yeah, it's because he started all of these tales that ended up having some layer in fact, or how the legend began and so on. And that's why they were exemplified and blown up to the portion and point that they kind of were. And why now the shadows are looking back into who Yor was and how he's not really a monster like so many indicate. It was a way for Shin, or the alter ego, if you will, of anything the Drifter might have had, to try to bury it all together. I can really just kind of keep going with all of this, but there are plenty of things that you can argue back with me on, and I completely understand it. But I'm starting to I'm really wondering just how far off it goes.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like because the other thing too is to kind of, one of the biggest counterpoints to that too is the Drifter could be, the reason we call it I mean, you'll see where I'm going with this pretty quickly, but like the Joker as being an archetype there, the Joker did things that was more chaotic than anything. I think that was one of the few pieces of the Dark Knight trilogy that I did appreciate with, who was that? Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger's Joker.
He kind of really personified that chaotic figure of like, he's like, I don't even know what I'm going to do. And that was kind of the thing with, he was certifiably insane, but that was also, he didn't really have to kind of counterpoint, he didn't really have a split personality. He just was kind of insane. Like he didn't think
the thing about chaos. All it takes is a little push.
Like, oh my gosh, some of my favorites. Like, but I mean, like, so like as far as like Drifter goes, it could be also that he's just snapped. Like there's also the possibility that, if the story, now this begs the question, then obviously does the Drifter stories actually hold water about like the creatures of the darkness or the creatures who neutralize light or whatever, if they actually did encounter something like that, then it could also be argued that he's not all 100% up, he's not all there, which is also a potential explanation of why he flip-flops so willy-nilly, is he's just kind of living in the moment. He's not really paying attention to what's going on really 100% around him. But then you have things like the Malfeasance Quest where he's like calling the shadows to kind of come team shot Shin. He's like, if all of us take a single shot, then we can take him down. One-on-one we can't take him, but getting it to the point where he's kind of calling to arms the idea of putting Shin down, or putting the man with the golden gun, as they refer to him.
Yeah, meanwhile, we have the climax of Letters from a Renegade, and
right, yeah, it's yeah, well, and it's like, and I totally see where you're coming from. I mean, like I said, like the theory is at this point, given what we know, I mean, I'd love to be able to say with as much comfort as I can say that Dredge and Yor was Rezlazir, right? I mean, that's been confirmed within the content. Now, whether or not there's further implications is still to be seen. That story is still evolving, but we do know that facet to be, that connection exists. That connection is a 1-to-1 ratio. We don't have any more assumptions about who that is. But now, as you kind of brought up, does that mean that necessarily that's the only connection? Like that, we don't know that necessarily, but I can't say definitively that, the Drifter's not Orsa. Though to be honest, I think there would be a lot of finagling as far as like timeline explanations needed. to explain how Orsa was present when the Drifter wasn't present, and how people who knew Orsa, I think there's a lot there. I think there's more holes than there isn't on that particular theory. Just me personally, I think. Now, does that mean that it's impossible to explain away? No, not at all. We don't know enough about either of them for, all it takes is a bit of backfilling of information and reconnecting of certain things, and it can make sense. But yeah, I mean, and Dino in chat is exactly right there. Why would there need to be any finagling? Drifter is a habitual liar.
Right.
That of all the characteristics about Drifter, that is one of the ones that everyone can agree to is 100% certain, is that you can't really trust anything that he says, because there's a really strong chance that he's just lying, and there's not necessarily anything that he's gaining from it.
Yeah, I'm going to say Eva Levante said the same thing, and again, I would like to think that she is a fairly good judge of character, but this thought that maybe he's maybe there is something about him that she doesn't trust, but she doesn't wholeheartedly say, like, I know a snake when I see one. There's something off about him, but I can't put my finger on it. And usually that's what you end up getting with some that have certain mental disorders.
Right. Oh, yeah.
In a lot of cases, it's just one of those things you don't necessarily understand the extent of it. And meanwhile, we live in this golden age where we still see that, like, mental disorders are very much still a thing. Like, they're not in the same way, but anyway, I'm going.
Well, I mean, the concept of like a PTSD in Destiny is a very big thing. I mean, and I wholeheartedly have no problem with the storyline having characters with that affliction, because if you just kind of take a step back and look at the event, like just looking at the events that have happened in game in the past 2 or 3 years, because it's roughly a 1-to-1 correlation with our time and Destiny time. There has been, to put it lightly, a lot that has happened in that short span of time. I mean, that's not even taking into account the whole apocalypse that was the collapse, the destruction that rained down upon humanity during that point in time, the Dark Ages, where the rules of physics were rewritten with the Risen, and everything that everyone knew was turned upside down and stripped away. There is good reason for people to have issues with reality right now, I think, in Destiny. And to be frank, the fact that there are people who don't, or who are able to continue existing on a day-to-day basis, like Eva, like Amanda, and these are just normal citizens. Like, these aren't special, or they're special, not that, but they're not like guardians. They're not like superpower or superhuman entities. These are regular citizens. Like, Eva is a mortal person. Amanda is a mortal human, and not only are they operating, arguably okay, they're actually in some ways thriving, right? It's that hope that is such a drug in Destiny, and it's what's so enticing to me as a person looking into the game world, is this idea of this light that just refuses to go out. And I think that to pull it back into the concept of what Dredgen, what the Dredgens and the Shadows of Yore and all them we're looking at, is like, with regards to that light, that shadow that is cast by the figure of Dredgen Yore, the Shadows of Yore, the legacy of his name, how does that fall into play with our Guardian, right? And I know I kind of had a point here to talk about, like, the progression of corruption, and that kind of ties back into the rite of cleansing, which we kind of talked about a little bit. And I really want to read real quick. This is actually one of the early entries from Tebben's journals. It's the grimoire card, The Shadows of Yore. And Tebben writes, "They tried to hide the truth, but we followed its winding path, pieced together the fragmented map of events across time and space. Quite literally, mind you. From Traveler's Shadow to the dark corridors beneath the moon and the long, harrowing journey back again. From the sickness inflicted upon the Crucible to the breaking of light on the red sands. From a forgotten settlement in the west to the horrors of North Channel and Velar. From the wilds of the Breaklands to the hateful cold of Durga. Finally, then, to Dwindler's Ridge, where darkness met pure angry fire. We've traced Yore's steps from beginning to end and back again. We've studied his reign, the terror he seeded, the violence he wrought as if free of conscience, only to discover a true and terrible thing. He was not simply the monster the legends claim him to be. Though in finding this truth, we've come to understand the desire to build an armor of false narrative around all he'd done, all he'd become. Yet that understanding, our understanding of the need to control Yore's mythology, should not be seen as agreement on the matter. Quite the opposite, actually. When viewed as he truly was, not as he is imagined, we challenge the known mythologized depiction of the man who was Dredgen Yor. In our estimation, the monster so many see was, in fact, the best of us, his sacrifice total, his vile means meant to carve a greater end. They hide this truth because they fear the consequences of those who would dare follow in his footsteps, to tempt the darkness, to allow one's light to be tainted. Few could walk that ledge and not fall completely into despair. And while theories exist to support or contradict the purity of the gift we wield, Yor's life offers a glimpse into unexplored possibility. Orsa agrees. He also believes, as I do, that there is a manner in which we may be able to replicate Yor's damnation while avoiding the same heavy toll. We will surely be judged for what it is we are about to achieve, and there will surely come a time when the lone gunman will want words, or worse. But now we go upon an old path, one we seek to make our own, and should we fail, may the light avenge all those who we make to suffer." So I mean, this is really kind of the point where you kind of see Tebben almost making a justification for the shadow's existence, right? And it kind of ties into the the quote from what I believe it's the parables of the Allspring, where walk into the darkness with strength to return to the light. And you get that a bit with the symmetry too, right? It's not just Osiris and Rezel here that have mentioned this kind of concept of crossing into the other side and back. The symmetry also talks about the balance, the importance of the balance between the dark and the light, and the guardian who potentially could do both. And so that's kind of the progression. I kind of regard this, or I kind of view this as the progression of corruption. You're like, is corruption necessarily a bad thing if you can control it, right? And that's what Orsa is constantly kind of from what we assume we hear from Orsa. He's constantly being like, yeah, we've tamed it. We've tamed the darkness. We've purified the rites of cleansing, which is to create new thorns, but to not allow those thorns to infect you, really. Within Ghost Fragment Thorn 5, we hear the reference to taming of the sickness. He says, "We have tamed the sickness, broken it with unwilling sacrifice," which that line alone is disturbing. But to go on, it says, "Now we claim our reward. Have you heard the whispers, brothers, sister? The shadow speaks. All we have to do is listen. Its secrets are our gift. Its gift our evolution. The others misunderstand. We are the weapons of sorrow, living and free, the hated heroes of this broken age." So, I mean, a lot to kind of unpack there, which is where you kind of start seeing the psychosis, I guess, would be the best term for it. The split from reality that Vale or Orsa is kind of falling in is like, it's like an evolution of a sociopath in a way, and I mean the sociopath in the clinical definition of a individual who is not able to empathize with others, right? It's an individual who sees other entities as nothing more than figures within the world that do not have in and of themselves their own sentience or conscience. Like they are just tools. They are just pieces of the world around them. And you kind of see this argument by Orsa here with Thorn 5 when he refers to unwilling sacrifice. So they are using others to further define what it is to be, a shadow of yore, to kind of further their own evolution without consideration of the individual who they are afflicting with the punishment of that sacrifice. And this is where you kind of start seeing the transcendence into what would arguably be the sickness that supposedly they are taming, because by becoming a weapon of sorrow, you are infecting yourself with a darkness that is corrupting the light. And so you can't then say that you have tamed the darkness if the darkness is tainting you to that degree, I think is my point of view there. And Beard, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one.
I think that's honestly about on the same general idea that I have as well. There's I've talked about it several times previously as well, and I'm kind of I'm concerned isn't the word. I'm trying to think of the proper word here, but I'm intrigued by the fact that they're going along this line even more.
Mm-hmm.
But like the shades of gray idea
mm-hmm.
is really starting to become more commonplace as we kind of go along. Releasing these ideas of a dark mirror. And then, of course, seeing how our Guardian acts as Destiny 2 kind of progresses, especially through Forsaken and whatnot. Too.
Yeah.
I continue to sit back and think that we are being presented a different story with Forsaken thanks to some of the marketing material, but also just because of the absolute difference in tone that is now presented in how the game's world is kind of shown. But I really do hope, when all is said and done, that they continue down that line, where our Guardian kind of skirts this idea of light and dark, and how it is a very thin line, as Aldrin says before he gets cracked. I really do appreciate that they're kind of going down that thinking, though, because it continues to showcase both sides' point of view very well, and it continues to at least show that like one is very prevalent in one side, or maybe less so than we even think, because if we look at somebody like Ikora, who is the iconoclastic one, she has that bit of darkness inside of her as well, if we're going by a personality sort of side. And then some can argue that even though he's looking out for the best interests of the city, Zavala kind of has that same sort of idea as well, making the heavy sacrificial moves that he kind of needs to do, but it's not in general order of like what you would kind of expect on it. And it still comes down to point of view and perspective overall. And that's, I think, where these theories, of course, especially with like how the shadows are kind of conducting their general business. It's not business, but it's the best word I can think of. As they kind of go through their day-to-day stuff, figuring out the entities of Yore and whatnot. That's what I kind of think is the important piece, is that they've taken it that step farther, where some of the others we already know have already gone slightly down the path.
Yeah, and I think, kind of talking about the Forsaken piece, I think the seed of it was actually really even back within vanilla Destiny 2, right? Yeah. I mean, when they presented Gaul, right, they presented Gaul as the hero of his own story. And Beard, I know you're gonna kind of agree with this, but the best villains are the ones who are heroes in their own story, because that means there's depth. That means that and I think that's kind of where we see, that's where I'm hoping kind of that they're going to take this. Like, even if ultimately the Shadows aren't quote unquote the villains that, they're kind of being led to be portrayed as, because like, let's look at, just real quick, let me walk through the Rite of Cleansing, right? Or the jagged purpose quest. It starts with us getting basically turn in bounties, and eventually you get this quest called Jagged Purpose. And the first step is a task called Harvest of the Lesser, which is, I believe, is the Echoes of Darkness is what's coming up. But the quote is, "A sickness is needed bound in darkness. Bathe your light in horrors that their stain may linger but not overwhelm. This is the first step upon the hated path." So all these quotes are going to be from Dredge and Veil, just real quick. And then the second quote is, "There will be suffering, but know that you do this for a just cause. If the darkness is to be defeated, it must be understood. The void will siphon that which the weapon needs, and the weapon will feast." And then we get the next one is, "Willful death and destruction leads to the dimming of one's light. Those who walk this path must cleanse themselves or succumb to the shadow's influence." And then finally, "The sickness is seated. Claim the ashen bone of the unwed from their resting place. Bind them to your cannon that the disease may take hold and your jagged thorns be set." So you see right here, even in those four quotes, there's definitely darkness, right? There's definitely that dark corrosion. There's that dark influence. But then there's that one step there where it's like cleansed by the light. It's like, what is this? Cleansed by the light, literally you can, and this is back in Destiny 1, so keep that in mind too, but you literally consumed motes of light to quote cleanse yourself and the weapon. So this is similar to the original Light in the Darkness quest, where we actually took the original frame, or the thorn frame, to the speaker and did similar thing. Like, they basically force fed this weapon, which is kind of been presented as a to a degree sentient thing. They force fed it motes of light to cleanse it from the darkness that it had been feasting upon with the death of guardians and other creatures. And then ultimately you again, in the same vein as a Light in the Dark with Jagged Purpose, you have to go to the Summoning Pits, which is also where they renamed Fogoth, which was kind of a point of contention for me. But, you had to go and you had to face down Zior, who is the corruptor of Rezel, from the, I believe it was, which one was it? I just blanked on the card that it was. It was one of the Rezel, I think it was like the third Rezel Zior card. Rosenbone? No, Rosenbone is the ship, right?
Yeah, that's the ship.
That's the ship. Okay. Anyways, I think it's like the third card in the Rezel Zior story. But so like Zior is like the unwed, basically, who corrupts Rezel. And then you have to defeat that that wizard. It's a wizard in the Summoning Pits. You have to defeat it, and once you defeat her, you get Thorn, and hey, everyone is happy, right? But we see here that even here you have that kind of that dynamic perspective that what they are doing is they're sacrificing people in the short term to save them in the long term, I guess, is the most concise way of kind of explaining what I'm understanding them to be trying to justify what they're doing here. Is like, because they start out with Ghost Fragment Thorn 5 or Ghost Fragment Thorn 5, and they're like, yeah, we performed unwilling sacrifice. Okay, so the term unwilling sacrifice is like a huge point of contention for me, because that there's no good way to use that term. I can't think of a way of like, hey, we need some unwilling sacrifices. that by definition means that you're not going to agree with whatever I'm about to give or whatever I'm about to do to you, right? I mean, like, you just can't do that. Thank you, Dino. Legend and Mysteries Resoluzier is the one with your. So like there's in order to do this quote tamed infection, you have to. I don't know. For me, it's a moral thing. It's the age old argument: does the end justify the means? Right. I think the Shadows have the argument that the end does justify the means. And the problem here is that that's all great and good, but when the means requires the sacrifice of a person, that's a problem. And that is when you have to think long and hard about what exactly it is that you're trying to do, because I think from like a philosophical standpoint, from a moral standpoint, that begs the question: does the end justify the means? Are you justified? Is anyone justified in sacrificing another living creature in order to quote unquote arbitrarily quote unquote save a species? Like at what point does that sacrifice become acceptable, and what point does it become unacceptable? And I know this is kind of a thin ice topic that can really easily transition into real world, which is, I think, also where it's so intriguing to me from my perspective, is because this is something that I know people struggle with. Like in reality, this is a concept that people struggle with.
It's old age debate, if you will. And
yeah.
One, of course, that you can go back to if you're a Star Trek fan very easily. The needs of the many versus the needs of the few.
Right. And yeah, exactly. And because and it's not something that's in the modern world either. I mean, this has been, kind of like what you're kind of saying there too. It's been an argument philosophically and, politically throughout history of humanity is at what point does the individual, trying to think of the best way to say it, at what point is the need, I mean, exactly kind of what you're saying, where does the balance exist between the needs of the many and the needs of the individual? What is more sacred, right? Is there a tipping point? And this is something that throughout the history, throughout documented philosophical debates, it's been an argument from both sides. There's always going to be an argument from one side or the other. And, in modern world, you have the debate over the death penalty. We have, here in America, there's like the pro-life, pro-choice debate. I'm not going to weigh in on that, but I mean, these are modern examples. In more historical times, you have military situations. Beard, you're one of your favorite authors, Sun Tzu. This is strategy. Like, at what point does the sacrifice of a squad, is that justified to save an army? Like who is fit to make those determinations? And this is ultimately where you kind of get into the I would say even discomfort of some of the topics that the existence of the Shadows bring up for players. And it's something that you should be kind of uncomfortable with, is if you start thinking about, your creation of a weapon of sorrow is in and of itself creating sorrow. That is why it's called a weapon of sorrow. And that will kind of actually transit into, I guess, arguably one of my final points that I really did want to bring up, is the impact, the effect of our characters now being given the title of Dredgen. Like, what does that mean for us as guardians, I guess, in the world of Destiny, that we have done the necessary steps to be referred to as a dredgen by other characters? Because ultimately that's what it is, right? That is what we see with the final quote from the Drifter. He basically is like, you're a dredgen now, pick your name. You've been given that. We get the information, and there's this information from the Drifter's Gambit lore entries where you see the Renegade basically call out, hey, if anyone starts calling them dredgen, let me know, because I need to have words with them. Which that doesn't set the stage for anything at all. That's not setting up stuff for awkward conversations. And so, but it also, and Beard, I really want to hear your thoughts on this, because it also sets up the possibility of a dynamic story in game. Mm-hmm. Because not everyone is going to have the dredgen title. So, from a fourth wall perspective, I can't help but be like, so does that mean that there's gonna be different lines of dialogue if you have a dredgen title, or if you don't? If you don't have that little checkbox ticked, we don't have to deal with the snarkiness from characters that we might have to with Joker's Gambit. What's gonna go on there?
I'm gonna say, which it still begs the question on how you perform certain content, if you do or not. There are actually two types of shadows that, of course, we would partake in or understand when it comes to Destiny, especially. For instance, we have, of course, the shadows of yore, but we also have...
Sorry, chat. Is that why Green's missing tonight?
Yeah, I was going to say. Might be able to find her in a ditch somewhere. No, I'm kidding.
Sorry, I'm sorry for interrupting. I just saw that from Black Flag, and I was like, oh, that has to be called out.
I wanted to kind of wait to see how chat would react to that one. Good. I'm glad everybody's giggling. So again, there's the shadows of yore that we have, of course, but there's also the shadows of Callus. And these are both measures that we kind of have in terms of like how our paths kind of deviate from where the norms are. These are ways that we kind of can influence how our legend and legacy is written and built, in terms of like what actions we've taken as a person. The same thing can be said of like how you are as a human being, though, as well. Investigating what actions you take, what it is you do, stuff of that nature can really impact who effectively you are, or how it is you are perceived by those outwardly. I don't really need to look far in terms of telling you like where you can look in that respect. American politics is a very big one right now. It's also a very easy topic to dig into. And how people kind of look into perspective. Could just be it's very much in my mind right now. I don't know which. But in that regard, like you could pretty well take a lot of different facets. Think about a military leader, if you will, and how they are kind of labeled, or how they effectively are viewed for their decisions that they otherwise make. What is it that makes somebody a dredgen or a shadow or otherwise? Anyway, whole convoluted thing, line of thought, etc., that kind of just lines back like, are we going to see this as a possibility? Maybe. I'd like for it to be. Because technically, if I don't get the dredgen title, but I've dabbled in Gambit, then maybe somebody can be like, oh man, it's a really good thing you didn't keep going down that line, because it looks like that was just the worst way possible. All of a sudden I find out, oh, being a dredgen actually was the thing that would have made the most sense.
Right.
Because Shadow as as a title, or Dredgen even as a title. Like Dredgen bothers me that we received that as the title, because Dredgen is what is it? The Infinite Abyss, I think is what
Abyss.
It is now.
Abyss is, I think.
Abyss.
So Dredgen
Okay.
Yor is infinite, or the Infinite Abyss, and Dredgen is just Abyss. Okay. Which, like, I'm still, I still play with the translation of that, because I'm like, but what is? But yeah, it's the Abyss.
Well, how often do two names go together that also change the meaning of a sir or prefix name as well?
Never. Never happens.
It never happens. Never. Like it could be Dredgen Vale is something completely different in that regard. Dredgen Ursa could be something completely in that regard as well, etc. The biggest thing, though, in terms of what I mean by this, I've brought it up already. We see these concepts of gray. They are referred to as shadows of Yor. Mm-hmm. A shadow means you're kind of playing with the darkness. A shadow is something that light can cast. However, it is something that you can still see through. You can see down into the grass that you're looking down into, or otherwise. Like, light is still prevalent. It's still kind of there.
So wait, it's like a penumbra?
Yeah, it's
imagine
like
that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a shade of gray or something like that. But that's where I kind of wanted to bring it, like these ideas and how we have presented ourselves as guardians and whatnot. I'm certainly interested to see where they kind of go. The gathering of shadows can also be a completely different aspect, especially considering there isn't just one Dredgen per this moment, as it seems. There are multiple viewpoints that seem to be culminating from all of them, just so on. That's where I kind of would like to see that we do something different, but with how dark all of the newer content is, that seems like it's coming down the line with Joker's Wild and Penumbra, and then of course still looking into the Dreaming City and our impact on Forsaken. It's kind of silly to sit back and think that Black Armory was probably the most light-worthy endeavor that I think we've had since what we had seen with the base campaign of Destiny 2, or arguably with Rise of Iron. Black Armory was probably one of the more... It's of course listed into weapons, but the city and foundries focus so heavily on equipment that it doesn't surprise me. It's just interesting how that all seems to flip, but yet it's the one that absolutely reflects the idea of black in its name, indicating something of darkness or something related to it. Meanwhile, it's probably the most light thing that we've kind of seen in terms of what's to come. I just find it interesting or significant, weird, I don't know which, but...
Well, and the other thing too that I just find interesting about, the concept of the shadows of Yor, kind of going back to that real quick, is that from the get-go, Dredgen Yor described himself as the sole forebearer and last descendant of the name Yor, the first and only of his family. Yet now we have, we kind of, it's to me interesting because, like, he presented Rezel, and I think Dino said this in chat too, like Rezel chose the name Dredgen Yor because he wanted to dehumanize himself. He wanted to become a natural disaster, like, in a way. He wanted to consume the hope. He wanted to, be the storm against which nothing could survive. And
as Ward's ghost says, he's a force of nature.
Right, yeah, and exactly. But it's interesting because within Ghost Fragment Thorn, it's described as the first and only of his family, the sole forebearer and last descendant of the name Yor. But now, with the shadows of Yor, you can see that that's not true. He's not the last descendant of the name Yor, because others have taken his title, others have taken his name, And in regards to like family heritage and stuff like that, or lineage, that's what it is, right? That's what family names is. That's why in certain cultures, like, you know, the Far East, you have the first name, or the first name of a person's name is actually their family name. It's actually more of a Western tradition to have your individual name first and then your family name. It's which is a social, you know, commentary there to be said. But like, that's, to me, is really interesting because Yor started this path and he intended to be the only one. Like he started with the understanding that he was the first and the last, and yet now we see that he wasn't the last. He might have been the first, but he's not the last. I think that's an interesting dynamic to be that I'm hoping that they kind of explore as well, is like,
well, and in the same, is it like we're seeing it from a very English theming with the way that they have the name written out. Mm-hmm. Is it technically more like something like a Japanese or Chinese name orientation, where the last name is first?
Right, that's what I mean. Is like
the first name is second. Okay.
Right, because it's similar. Yeah. Similar to. I know this is. You know, I've made this comment. I know a lot of people in chat have made this comment already tonight. But Dredgen is akin to Darth, right? In Star Wars, you have Darth Vader, Darth Bane.
We only have Darth Bane in here already.
Right,
like, why not?
I mean, why not? I mean, come on. It's not like he was a cool character or anything. But like, I mean,
still waiting for Maul to make his appearance again.
Yes.
I mean, we all know that Maul just pops up out of freaking nowhere. I'm looking at you, Solo.
I love that he gave him back his robot legs. God. But like, anyway. But I mean, in the same vein too, like the title Dredgen is a title. It's recognized as such, and so the individual name, yes, would be Yor. There is not another Yor, but you know, classically, Darth Vader is the first and only of the Vader. You know, that they take those individual titles to individualize themselves, but they then also are only referred to as Darth, you know, Vader, Darth Bane, Darth Maul. Same here, Dredgen Yor, Dredgen Vale, Dredgen Bane. Like, so there is a family in the sense that they are allied through the first term, but then there is the individual, which I think is where you were kind of saying is like the more Eastern, is it etymology, I guess? I don't know if that would be there. The structure, right, of the naming conventions within there. But yeah, and so that's where I just find that interesting that Dredgen Yor is kind of introduced. The Dredgen Yor from the very beginning really was introduced to us as the first and only of his name. And yet now we find with the Shadows of Yor that, you know, that might not be the case anymore. Like it's like, and then that begs the question, dude, the Shadows of Yor, are they really just shadows? Do they even really understand the powers with which they're playing with? Which is another thing I think chat's talking about right now, is like, you know, the shadow, kind of what you were saying, the shadow is cast in regards to another. Like they are a pale comparison to the actual thing being of the thing which cast the shadow.
I mean, it goes back to what I was saying about the Drifter and the dissociative personality disorder. If the hope was to create this tale and stop it with that alone as to be a cautionary tale, not the one with Asher and Eris, by the way, then at that point it makes me wonder how it effectively was supposed to stop these kind of instances, or was it made for the thoughts of weeding people out like this, which is Shin's seemingly ultimate goal, which again I would love to dig into with those letters, but I'm not gonna, of course, bring that
next
up.
week. Next week.
Next
can't wait. I'm right there with you because Oh,
Yeah. What we are talking about now with the evolution of this story, obviously it is no uh, it's no secret, of course, that the last word is coming back.
it's
But
as
where,
Bungie refers to the hand cannon shaped elephant in the room.
yeah,
I love that.
like all of these implications that we're talking about now that we're kind of hinting at, they go much further than just this. It's very important that you understand where the basis and all of this, of course, comes from, but it doesn't stop here. And granted, I'm sure you know after over 140 episodes to begin with, of course, it's not going to stop here. This tale continues to unfurl, and we've been talking about it for 4 years now. Uh, it just continues to be a different thing overall.
Yeah, so on that note, real quick, I did a date calculation from when we first talked about Yor, and I kind of did the same thing when we talked to John. Which, by the way, if you guys haven't listened to the behind the scenes episode, we talked to John Goff, who is the writer behind this whole thing. I'll link that in the show notes this time. But it has been 2 years, 11 months, and 9 days since we had the first episode about Dredge and Yor. And Sheesh. It is still, if not the one of my most like deeply interested hooks in this game is this story. Like, this story is just fascinating on so many different facets. But yeah, I mean, like, we have had drip fed information from Yor and Ward and Malphur and now the Shadows. Like, we've had this information being drip fed to us from day one of Destiny 1. Like, there was, in the original release with the original grimoire that was dropped, there was a good amount of information. It's just like from day one, this has been one of those just foundational stories that has been kind of in the background, just kind of gathering steam, if you will. And now we're starting to, I don't even think we're at the point where I would say it's getting to the climax of the story. I think it's just starting to get to the point where it's starting to gain enough pressure that people are like, hey, what's that? What's this thing that's going on over here? Like, there's so much potential with this story.
It will highly depend on actions that are taken on the 29th.
Right.
I think with the quest line that may exist or what may be presented, that's effectively what I'm kind of worried about right now, is to see where or how that's going to present or carry on.
Right. And that's a true. I'm trying to curb my expectations too, because
I know,
to be fair to developers, for gameplay purposes, there is only so much you can do, right? You can definitely do a lot more in text than you can within the game world, I guess, that you interact with. So right. There's a fine balance there as well, for sure.
Well, and considering that, I know for some this is the way that they would have effectively not like to see this all played out, but everything that we have heard about and read about with the Shadows of Yor, with Shin Malphur, Razil, etc., all of these characters have effectively been written out on pieces of paper or otherwise. We have never actually fully seen any of the implications that may have like cropped up from them, save for possibly now, of course, with the Drifter, and definitely with almost like full confirmation with Callum. But even then, we are hearing those events in post more than we are actually seeing the events play out entirely. I know for some that's kind of a disappointing moment where they're not able to actually see things go on. But for me, that's where it's pretty well always been and how it's always been. And I almost would prefer that they leave it like that just so it doesn't kind of break the way that the standard has been going. Because granted, it does completely play into the theory that I have going on anyway.
Well, and then,
that's just a story and a tale, if that is their effective nature that they're looking for.
That's true. Yeah, that's a valid point. There's also the fear. I think I kind of get the feeling that I know a lot of people that we talk to. This is a very close to the heart story for a lot of people. Like the story of Thorn and the Last Word within the lore community is something that for a good amount of people got hooked to Destiny because of this story. Like this story is the crux of the reason that a lot of people got involved. I know we talked about this with Purple last week. I know Pins, he this is a huge thing for him. And so I think there's also that slight nervousness, whenever you say, this is my favorite book and they're making a movie, what's going to go, that's going to go perfectly. That always works out the best.
Does.
It always is perfectly translated into a movie.
The Hobbit was a perfectly translated film.
What?
Set
Black Tower?
That went from totally. No, it was a perfect trilogy that absolutely needed to be made from one of the most concise and interesting Hobbit books, or Lord of the Rings books that Tolkien ever wrote. They were absolutely worthwhile in every second of watching.
Leave the necromancer alone, okay?
If you can't catch my sarcasm, then I think you missed the train.
But I think that might be where some of the nervousness... I because...
I missed that option, I'm sorry.
I think as far as like some of the apprehension that I'm at least sensing all you have to do is look at the contentious response that the idea that the identity of Rezlazir and Dredgen Yor creates. Like like I said at the top of the show, it's still apparently a debate. Like which I find kind of fascinating, but or not fascinating, but I don't know. Like infuriating. Yeah, infuriating, I think. Because what I mean by that is that there are still a lot of players who refuse to think of Dredgen as anything other than a hunter. And while I can see where that misconception is being stemmed from, I totally get that. We do have additional information that has been given to us that does confirm that was an entirely cognizant misdirect, not just on the part of the writers, but actually of Yor himself. Like that character specifically created those misdirections to further people off from or those were created to kind of lure people away from the truth of his story, right? Even in the game, we have to be cognizant of false trails of rabbit holes, as chat's talking about right now. So, that nervousness going into this next week, I think is going to be, I do want to reiterate, hold it, hold the expectations a little bit and just wait and see how it goes, because translating what has been in text into gameplay, it's a tough thing to do. And I don't want people to get upset and be like, this is just terrible. It's like it's just it's translating the storytelling into a slightly different medium. Something might get lost in translation. That doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be lost, because we can always get retranslations later, is all I'm saying.
Yep. Either that or good old-fashioned clarification.
Yeah.
Because one thing to always remember about this story to begin with, and I will always effectively bring it up, the idea of canon. We've talked about Star Wars on this episode enough, so I may as well talk about that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Canon for Star Wars had to be written out, signed and sealed pretty well in triplicate by any and all that have been involved in the main projects to ensure that the accuracy was written and was listed there. Anything past this would effectively be called a retcon. Because now, instead of just having a writing bed, if you will, or a writing from a main scheme that they're following, now they have a set lore involved. To my knowledge, that's never been done with Destiny. And when all is said and done, that effectively means that this story is being presented from the writers in a lot of different perspectives and ways that they're presenting themselves. So there is no set in stone way that things are supposed to work. As we know, the darkness was effectively not written out, but not told to us at the moment. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to really dig into that story or tale all that much. I would argue to say that we're kind of getting into that the further that we kind of go, but it's taken a while for us to get there, is basically how that all kind of stems and plays and changes. But it's just to stress the point, anything that we may say on here is subject to alter or change. Same with anything that anybody else may say. This is why it is a theory and not a factorum, which really isn't the proper word for it, but I say it often enough, like the theory of relativity is a theory because there may still be ways to disprove it or change it. And that's basically how the writers are kind of operating as well in their same kind of assumptive play, if you will. They're still working off of what they have and kind of just building and changing it. Maybe eventually there will be something that will have a written out, signed and sealed in triplicate instance where suddenly Destiny has a full-fledged understood lore on where it's supposed to go. Problem is, we probably still won't even see that book because it'll still be mired in mystery and whatnot. But they will at least have a guide on what they need to go by. With so many different things that have happened with the story over the last several years, I do not see Destiny as anything more of like a passion or fan project that's being written by several different people. But these stories are still incredibly interesting and tell a tale that, especially with the linking threads that are between them, all kind of just fall in line. So for me, that's where I just wanted to kind of stress like how the stories and tales and so on that we listen to or talk about here, they're all subject to change no matter what we present or what we talk about.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a good note to kind of start wrapping up too on is, exactly that. I mean, I can't really summarize really what we do much better than that either.
I feel like I've done this now like twice or three times in a row. I don't mean to.
No. I mean, it's just I'm gonna let you just lead the charge on the segue into shoutouts. That's entirely okay. You're much better at than I am. But like, I mean, right, and yeah, and chat right now we're talking about the split personality theory, and so it's just like, yeah. But the I agree 100%. Like at the end of the day, this is our interpretation of a story, which it's artistic representation, right? It's I bring to the table my experiences and I understand things through my bias. I don't expect anyone else to necessarily have the same point of view as I do, but I think I find it silly to be upset, I guess would be the best term for it. I don't get people who get bent out of shape about people having different opinions, especially about something like a video game. Like that, like I can understand getting bent out of shape about stuff, like real life events, like totally understand that. But events within a game, I think, Beard, you've made these comments a couple times. It's like, it's a game. Like, my opinion of what is happening, my opinion and theories are flavored definitely by my own personal, theories and my personal opinions about things. But at the end of the day, what I see as good evil within the Dredge in your story is definitely like I like when we were talking about the Jagged Purpose quest. Definitely have an opinion on, like, if you couldn't tell by the rant of the unwilling sacrifice, definitely have an opinion on if this is an okay thing or not. But as far as where the writers take it, that's where, I mean, that's like getting mad at an author for putting a book in putting a twist in a book that you didn't see coming, right? It's just, I don't know. I find that a little silly.
What a twist!
Sorry, chat. So yeah, shout outs, Beard. What do you got for us this week?
The only major one goes to I know what some people kind of have in their mind, and that is to BioWare and Anthem.
Mm-hmm.
I put out a pretty scathing review of what I thought was going on with the demo or beta or whatever they really want to call it. They call it a demo. Demo's got to work right, man. But anything that I effectively said or presented there, a couple people misconstrued as me saying that I wanted to see the game crash and burn, that I had no interest in it whatsoever.
I'm really? Sorry, but I didn't read that at all. Like I was gonna interject. I didn't see yours as scathing at all. I mean, for me, it was pretty legit. I mean, you were pretty clear that it was this is just your opinion. Like the whole thing about the migraines, I thought was a really good point. Like I don't know.
They I don't know. That comes kind of full circle with something else that I want to touch on, but here in a second. But in the same, like, I know that this is a very big thing for BioWare to nail. I know it's a very large thing that is kind of pressuring them on, like, EA's plate and whatnot as well. And I would hate to see that the studio ends up going under because the game either doesn't perform or something else happens, or investors are investors, and that's all she wrote, because it seems to be the way that the larger AAA-ish gaming industry is kind of going. But I do wish them luck, wholeheartedly. I think that there is a great base for a game that is sitting there. It was the thing I said about Destiny 1 when that was around, and why I think now that Forsaken has kind of branched into allowing for Destiny to be its own thing finally, kind of like what it was with Taken King, but now even more so. There's plenty of rooms for improvement for all angles and ends, but there's only so much you can do, and you have to kind of say, even as like a creator, I have to do the same thing, where I have to say when something is good enough. And eventually I have to say I might have to come back to this theory in 3 months when we get in some more information on a topic, etc. But that's why I specifically state that this is back towards BioWare and Anthem, however, because I think that both EA and Activision have kind of shown that their money sides are a little too showy right now. And there has to be this balance of give where they allow for a developer to still create the passion project or the art that they're looking to create. Otherwise, you really do take that level completely out. I've been seeing more things from like Devolver Digital lately that are very interesting. I've been seeing a couple things even up on like the indie showcase that Nintendo's been doing with the Switch. That's been phenomenal. And all these different games that seem like they have like minimum to no backing or a crowd-funded. Heck, I'm still looking at Shovel Knight and the fact that they're still making content for that game, and I came out how many years ago? It's just to say that I hope that this is the project that they really want to see of it. And I think that overall, I really hope that they do well as things kind of progress on. But they have definitely done I think, like, visually, I think they've done very well, save for, like, some of the color palettes that I think that they chose, where things just feel really bland in some cases. But the concept is there, and I would love to see it flourish. There is absolutely no harm in either us branching out to talk about something different, seeing a new story that kind of pops up now and again. There is no harm in another game performing well or doing well to bridge this idea of competition and make sure that people stay on their toes. That's why I think a lot of times people say, oh yeah, it's this killer, just to make sure that more basically, like, pops up, or more competition kind of spreads out and does more, etc. The MMO space is very volatile in that regard too.
Well, but to be fair, it always has been, right?
Well, World of Warcraft really held the mantle for a long time. But yeah, but if we count before that, now that, like, WoW's down to, like, I think 2, 3, or 4 million, I forget exactly what now.
Which is still an immense amount of.
It's still.
I mean,
it's still
just pause and think about
game.
that number.
Oh yeah. Well, the fact that they, like, capped, I think it was like 12.5 million, and now they're down to about a quarter of that. But still, it's like they probably have enough proceeds from all the sub fees that they had to carry that entire thing on for the next 20 years, and they would be entirely fine. Anyway, I being sarcastic, facetious in that regard, anyway, as it is. My previous point, though, kind of goes back to, like, how that some of the messages were apparently received by some through my tweet thread. I know I haven't been making content, but the fact that some people have been taking those words as me being like, I don't want the company to do well, this comes down to either reading too far into something, or you thinking that one notion is one way or another. It's not what I meant by it whatsoever, and by the end of the day, I ended up saying, hey, try the game out for yourself. It really wasn't for me for this go around, but it might be for you, so give it a shot. It's free anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it also ties back to what have happened in a couple of things with theories that I've presented on Twitter. Worst place to do so, because it's 240 characters. Unfortunately, I don't have, like, enough room that I could be like, look at these 6 different things that I'm trying to link back to in 240 characters. It doesn't work. But the whole idea is, like, having a little fun with it versus thinking so heavily into it. And some have gotten so laser focused on how proper a theory is, instead of just having fun with it anymore. I've said that I feel the wonder is gone from some people within the community. I have said that the fun is gone from some people in the community. Just take a step back and realize it's a game, please. I don't want to sound like I'm white knighting for anything, but please just do yourselves a favor. If that's your mindset, take a step back and, like, breathe and remember it's a game. If I have any advice for you for the week, that's it.
Yeah, I was looking for the
Viru. No. Viru says, Beard, it's time for showcasing a PowerPoint as a video with Windows Movie Maker. How about this? No. This is why I use Adobe, because it's at least a little better than Movie Maker. Please don't send me.
I'll be honest. I've totally played with that idea just to get a video out, because I have no freaking clue on video editing. Audio editing, I can answer most questions. Video editing, I'm like, click. I have no idea. Like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, There's just several things wrong with that statement. I started my early videos, granted, you will never see these. I started in Movie Maker.
Not even for your 6th channel.
Oh God. What are y'all saying? I have 6 computers to handle each channel? Is that what we're going with now? Y'all suck. I don't even know why I'm here. Jeez.
You can't leave yet.
It's fine.
I was gonna say,
have your
like,
shout out, and then I can run.
I was gonna say, you know, like, I think to kind of follow up with, I was looking. I saw, you know, there. Oh man, it's been a weird week because, like, I'm right there with you on like hoping the best, which is really weird for me to say. I hope the best for BioWare and through them EA, because the thing is like, regardless of my feelings towards like the practices that they might go through, that is a, you know, you have to realize again that this is the job for a lot of people, right? I think people who throw out a lot of like, I wish this game failed, like, you have to stop and think, you know, this is people's livelihoods. You know, I feel for the individuals who are caught up in the Activision situation right now. There's a lot going on behind, not really behind the scenes, but from a business standpoint. There's a lot going on, and as a person who, as my job is dealing with situations that we are constantly having to be aware of, that I sympathize with it, because it is not as easy as some people like to make it out to be, to do well in a business like that. Right. You know, the financial community is not forgiving at all if you make a misstep, which is basically, kind of, to sum it down, that's kind of what's happening with Activision right now. Investors are brutal, as they should be, because it's their livelihood too. I mean, the thing is at the end of the day, these are people's livelihoods that are being kind of moved around, right? And so there's going to be a lot of real consequences that go into place. That all being said, I saw earlier today, there was actually I don't know if it was earlier today or it was from yesterday, I just saw a retweet today over on Twitter, but there was a really good point that was being made about like how big games are kind of, we're seeing actually kind of a plateauing of big games, and it was talking about, like, from a business standpoint, the current iteration of games is kind of arguably kind of plateauing, and the next big thing that the investors are kind of looking at right now is VR, right? Because that's going to be the kind of the next, they're expecting that to be the next boost in graphics. But one of the reasons that they're actually, well, I mean, I don't have any skin in the game because I don't really have a strong feeling towards either. Like, I'm like, I don't know. I don't really care for it, but I also, I see more of augmented reality, like the HoloLens. Well, I'm more that way.
I can also deal with augmented reality even with my headaches.
Right. Well, augmented, because like
about VR.
Yeah, VR. Well, my problem is like, so as most people are very well familiar, I don't have a lot of time to game. So like, I have to kind of find ways to like fit it into things. So like HoloLens makes more sense in my brain because I can actually use it for more than just gaming, right? I can use it whereas like I can actually involve myself in other things. That's my pragmatism kind of coming through. But like, one of the things that they were talking about was actually not just the investors being, concerned about return of investments, which is ROI, which is a huge, huge thing. But the players, like the actual player base, we are seeing in today's world a fatigue of players because we are getting so inundated with these big AAA titles that we're running out of time in the day. There is literally not enough time to play all the games that are being kind of shoved down our throats. And so what's happening is kind of a natural a natural conclusion to that is that people are picking and choosing the games that they're going to spend their time on. And that, I mean, it sucks, but that is kind of that's the natural consequence of having, mortal life and having to sleep a certain amount of time. But, kind of doubling down on what Beard is saying, I really hope nothing but the best for Anthem. We were kind of talking about that before the show. I personally don't have really, I haven't even tried the demo because I have no interest at all in the game. But that's, again, from just my perspective. I want the game to do well. The game's story looks very intriguing. I am going to be keeping an eye on summary views of what's going on with the story. I'm very interested in that. But as far as mechanics go, I'm I looked at it and I was like, yep, I don't really care for it. I'm not a big fan of it. And from what I've heard, even the glowing reviews of people who have been able to get into the demo, I'm just it's just basically confirmed that it's not probably going to be my cup of tea. But again, like Beard said, that's not me judging them. I'm hoping that I see a big group of people who this is probably going to be a great game for, and I really hope it works out for them, because the more people that get involved in games, the better for the community as a whole. I don't see that as being a negative thing.
Yeah, there's no reason to shut out people that are joining your community or doing anything that way. New blood being brought into any kind of gaming scenario really can help with making sure that game stays afloat.
Right.
So be good to your newbies, because quite frankly, that's how you end up getting a lot of stuff that way. Or be kind to the people that are otherwise not familiar with what it is that you played previously. I bring up Anthem and compare it to Vanquish so very often. And in that regard, that's why it kind of appeals to me. I love Eastern style mech type games, and this one might end up playing with that a little bit. Considering I've got settings on Anthem, at least in the demo, that don't give me a headache. It's great. I can actually play the game, and there's no screen tear and all that. And that's even on the buggy piece of crap that they gave us. But there's a lot of industry news right now that's just, I'm sorry for jumping in on you, Blue. There's much. There's a lot of industry news that's going on right now too, with either people breaking up or companies closing down, games getting scrapped or restarted, and so on. It's pretty typical around this time of year that you're going to see that, because you already have either fourth quarter projections are mapped and ready to go. So they're well, let's just get the tanking done and over with. If we're already doing this bad, we may as well just end fourth quarter on a really bad note, start Q1 on a better note, or the opposite, where they're in very good streak and they can take the hit for now and just let investors kind of deal with it.
Well, and I think that goes back to understanding. I think it's not that this is much different. I think it's that it's becoming more transparent. Because coming from a business side, guys, this happens all the freaking time in business.
All the time.
This is not anything that's, I know a lot of people are freaking out because it's oh, the gaming community. No, this first quarter is brutal. Actually, there's no time that's not brutal, depending on the business. But it's just keep in mind that this is natural cycles, and so it's not necessarily the end of the world, I think, is all I would have to say.
Yeah, especially with some of the stuff that's coming out between Activision and class action lawsuits.
Yeah,
or anything.
So
I'm sure that's what you were kind of alluding
right.
To,
Yeah, class action. Class action lawsuits. They've been processed. They haven't been nothing's actually. They've just been brought to the public. They've just been announced. Yeah. There's nothing that's actually happening. They're still in the initial stages. But it's, for companies that size, though, sadly, that's a very common thing.
I gotta say that's why they have as many lawyers as they probably do.
Yep. Yep. That's why
yeah. Vero brings up the other one that I did want to talk about a slight bit too, and that's to also like wish the guys at Nintendo and Retro Studios a little bit of luck as well as they venture into creating Metroid Prime 4 because it was announced this morning. Well, at least it was this morning for me. It's now 1:30 in the morning as we're recording this, so that's where my joke comes from. Anyway, Nintendo actually posted a very short video where they basically said, yeah, what we had for Metroid Prime sucked. So
yeah. They're like, we're delaying
scrapping it. Yeah. They were like, this is not good to our standards, which says multitudes to the way that Nintendo is treating this game, as well as also like what their quality control looks like, to like what it is that they wanted to produce with the title itself, which again makes me wonder how Star Fox Zero and Metroid Other M happened, but maybe I shouldn't talk about those at all while we're trying to wrap this thing up. But I did just want to bring it to like to attention overall, like, hey, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Be patient with what it is that people and folks are trying to do. Some of them are either given like really bad crunch times that they just don't deserve. There are different problems in the industry than you necessarily not able to be connecting to a demo. The question now comes down to, well, why can't I connect to that demo? And effectively, what was the oversight that led to me not being able to connect with said demo? Or here with Nintendo, well, why don't I get to play my game this year with Metroid Prime 4? I've been waiting for so long for it. Well, that's fine, but you're going to probably get a better product out of it by waiting another few years probably that it's going to take to produce this next title. And with Retro Studios being at the head, it could be really worth it.
Right.
Anyway, that's what I wanted to at least kind of bring those up. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's been happening this year already. Not all of it necessarily good, but like a lot of stuff that's been happening that I know for some people it's set them off in different directions that they probably shouldn't go. But everybody's just in hard times right now, or at least from what it seems like for me. So just take a step back and breathe for a second and just think about what it is you might say before you say it. That's all.
Yep. And that being said, we're going to run through an outro and then we'll probably stay for a bit of an after show. And done.
Done.
All right. All right. Yeah, Will, you got here just in time for us to say bye-bye. No, yeah, I saw the Metroid thing. I think that was this morning. And I was like, "Oh, hey, look, a studio who actually takes I don't even want to say takes pride because that's not in at all, but who takes into consideration that, you know, well, and Nintendo's a weird beast too, because Nintendo has like no reason to balk at doing that. It's not like they're gonna be in trouble financially.
No. Well, freaking especially Jesus. Between like how much they have either in the bank or
right, that's what
how
I mean.
Well the Switch is doing at this point. Yeah.
Well, it's like I think even before the Switch, Nintendo they ran it. They like for financial analysis and stuff like that. Nintendo's always been fine, but Nintendo even before the Switch, they had enough reserves to like go severely in the red for like 2 decades before they had to start even worrying about something. Like, it's just ridiculous how much Nintendo, like, for a security point, like, how secure their assets are. Now, that being said, the reason why is because they are super strict about how they do things. But, I mean, but that's also why you get, like, what is the Switch labs or whatever. That's why they're completely comfortable trying that out. There's like, yeah, try it. If it fails, we just won't do it next year.
Which it succeeded extremely.
Oh yeah, well. But I mean, like the crazy shenanigans or the crazy experiments that Nintendo throws out there half the time. It's like, it's because they don't. Ultimately, it's like, hey, we think this will do well. If it doesn't, oh well, and like there is a very high return on most of their experiments, to be completely honest. Episodes will drop on Monday mornings. So I try to get that. I try to get them unless I forget, which it's only really happened with top 3, to be fair. But I usually try to edit them Saturday or Sunday. That gives me a couple of days. We changed that so I could have a little bit more flex time around, because with Twitch they ask us to hold 24 hours from live stream to release on other platforms. So like even if I edited it immediately after going off air, technically speaking, we wouldn't be able to put it out until Sunday morning. So just for the sake of my sleep schedule, the little thing that does exist, we've moved it back to Monday morning. That way people can download it on their Monday morning and then have it for the commute ready, basically. Speaking of the new platforms, though, there's did you see the supposed contender for Xbox and PlayStation they're supposed to be coming out with? I'm trying to remember what it was. It was
Madbox.
Yeah. What did that go anywhere, or is that still? I saw it like being really big, and then I didn't see anything about it.
I don't have much further than they have a concept for what the thing is supposed to look like. I forget who it's developing the thing, but it's still kind of like in the works at the moment, if it's even going to be a thing. All that it's bringing question to is looking at Valve going, why did you proceed with the idea of like Steambox and whatnot? Because that's exactly what they're kind of like trying to
that's what that's what I was looking. I looked at it very, very briefly, and it was like, I'm like, okay, so I didn't understand what was the difference. to be right. Honest, like and that's not me that's me kind of being lazy. I was just like, I looked at a really brief or the article that popped up, and I was like, I don't get it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment as well. But in the same, we kind of said that about Sony when they started down the path, of course, of picking up the PlayStation and all that.
I mean, yeah, that's true.
After it failed as like a competitor, if you will, for how that was put together. But in the same, it kind of like looks back on like things like Atari, and it's like, why did they ever come back or anything? Yeah, or how
Dreamcast. I still am in the firm camp of Dreamcast was just ahead of its time.
Absolutely.
I think that Dreamcast, if they released it today with today's technology, like the concept though, I'm like, it's basically the Switch. Like,
yeah. I'm gonna say they took the idea of Tamagotchi and blew that up to a higher level. And that's basically what Nintendo's even playing with now too, because they have with Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Have the Pokeball controller, and technically you can carry that around with you and train a Pokemon of your choice.
Does that correlate? So that like you upload it to it and it does the same thing like Pokemon Go does, like track your steps and everything? Oh, that's cool.
And then in addition, you can technically use that with Pokemon Go as well, and it can be a little catch tool. So while you're
that the little
being an unsafe bastard, that you can be a little safer.
I just remember when first came out, all the stories that hit of like people who drove into random objects. I'm like, guys, this is why we can't have nice things. Is because like I don't even feel bad for you. Like,
if you can't multitask, please don't drive and play those games. Please don't drive and do anything. Just drive. Don't chew gum. Don't try drinking out of a water bottle or your coffee from Starbucks. For God's sake, please, for the love of God, just focus on the road.
Well, that's like I think, what was it, like 2 or 3 years ago, they came out, you'll probably remember this, when they came out with the app for cell phones so that you could text and your camera would show you the floor, the street in front of you. I'm like, seriously?
Right.
Seriously? Like, apparently this was a huge, I don't understand this because, I mean, like, even if I can walk and read at the same time, so I don't really get that problem. But, like, I'm like, who is so like, people were walking into light poles. I'm like, it's a freaking pole. It's not a small object.
No. Yeah, I'm gonna say, and it's something
Thanks,
that
Shay.
doesn't move necessarily with the road.
Yeah, because they pretty quickly put out a patch to Pokemon Go, right? That if you're going over a certain speed, it like deactivates.
No, it'll bring up a thing that'll say you're driving too fast, and then it'll have like a speedometer that's there, but then underneath it is a button that says I'm a passenger.
Oh,
so
no.
all that it effectively does is makes it so that the driver, while they have the game, if they're driving with it, has to push another button, which takes them away from their concentration on the road. So, of course, the entire impetus behind this button is to stop people from playing the game, and we all know that it doesn't work like that.
Oh my god. That's like, oh my god, that's hilarious.
Like, I'll fully admit that I've gotten back into playing the game because my family has done so now too, but like
I've never even opened it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a bad addiction because
it's a bad addiction. So that's my problem is I'm like I don't know if I want to open it.
Well, like, so my dad and I'll go out now and again, and all of a sudden, like, 2 hours go by, and we look at each other like, what the fuck just happened? We legitimately are just kind of like, oh, we've been out for that long? Like, it's been great, just kind of like, you know, having fun and whatnot, because him and I don't get to do it all that often anymore. But, you know, that's the side of like why I enjoy doing it, is because I'll do a little on my way home from work. In there's a church close by that has like 4 spots that you can really gather at in the parking lot, and it's after church hours and everything, if there was ever anything going on. So it's just safe for me to putz around especially in the cold right now, in the parking lot. And then that's basically my day on it, and I go home and I'm fine with that. But then the times him and I go out for it, we're just like, oh my god, what happened?
Yeah, no. Like, my other thing is like my other thing is like I have a 5-year-old, so I'm like, like, do I really want to go here?
You'd need to get them a phone as well, so
right?
You both
yeah,
could play. That's how that works, right?
Right. Yeah. That's sure. Danger.
Yeah. My Will Robinson senses are tingling.
Yeah, I know. Oh man. Oh yeah. So my sister-in-law just sent me. So have you heard about this like pepper shaker hack where you take the salt shaker and it makes perfect sense. Like now that they've like shown it to me and I've seen this a couple times, I'm like I've never thought about it ever, but like they sent me a video of it. I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like everyone else is like, this is not real. I'm like, no, if you think about it, it's just basically vibrating the pepper shaker.
Yeah.
But now I keep getting pinged from people who are commenting on this video that they sent. Like, yes, I know it makes sense. I've already watched it 50 times. Oh, speaking of something to watch 50 times, I think I retweeted this, but I want to make sure because you should totally watch this.
Oh, no.
It's amazing. It's the German Shepherd who's dancing.
Oh, this one. Yeah.
It's so much fun. I watch it even when it's on mute. It's like that dog is so fucking happy.
It's just the fact that they have the invincibility storm music going.
Like the color and the sound is just. I mean that's just cherry on top. But like just watching the dog. Oh my god. I died when I saw that. I was like, yes, that is what I needed.
Yes, Viru, I saw that one and I'm just like,
wait, what happened?
Swedish. So Shackle was just let's see if I can find it quick. I forget how often she tweets. Hang on.
What? She doesn't tweet that much.
There you go.
I'm deleting. Oh, is there audio?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to. Let me see if I.
Our observations indicate some measure of consciousness lives in the most powerful taken. Disgusting!
Disgusting! Irish and Swedish accents colliding. Oh my god. I can't even do my own accent.
Shackle is such a mutt, it hurts. I mean that in the nicest way possible. But my goodness. As soon as I heard the voice, I was like, oh, boy.
Firu's response, this is what the internet's here for.
Just about.
Oh my god. Disgusting.
Oh.
Oh man. That is hilarious.
It's good times. But yeah, I just when I heard that, I immediately thought of frickin' Lemon Grab going, unacceptable!
Unacceptable! Grow! The Minecraft one?
Yes.
Where he grows an apple tree.
Might be times where they go too far.
Is that the one that has all of them?
No, there are several compilations for all of them. Three hours ago, the team is still here. We're still working. I'm posting like a madman to get you all updates in the Anthem game demo. Hope to resolve some of the problems that are stopping some of you from getting into the game soon. Yes, and then after you fix people getting into the game, you can also help with allowing us to play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, EA just tweeted, oh, that was about 30 minutes ago. They made changes to help improve Xbox connectivity.
Yeah.
Try doing a full restart on the Xbox.
Yeah, I'm gonna say between that and doing a few other things. The thing I'm running into, I can get into free play, no problem at all. But what destroys me is that I can't get into the main story mission that they have presented, which is also where you level up.
Is that is that the issue with not being able to unlock more
the extra frames
whatever called javelins or whatever?
The javelins, yeah. Yep, that is exactly right. It is a slightly major problem because I would like to.
I mean, it's not deleting itself, so they're still ahead on that count.
Yeah, I'm gonna say at least in that respect, EA is ahead of the game, or BioWare is. I don't know which, but you know, yeah.
Does progress carry? Is there progress to carry from the demo to the real game?
No, there is nothing in terms of progress that will carry over.
Okay. I mean, is there progress that there is, like, at all? Like, is there progress that you make in? Okay.
It gives it'll start you at level 10. The maximum is level 15. You're able to collect most to all of the crafting materials that are within the region that you're at. But there is yeah, I was waiting for that.
It explains why I love that ship.
There is also some weaponry that they kind of give you. Supposedly a good majority of the weapons at like lower end are pretty well fixed rolls or similar, which goes along with the standard that I'm seeing with the several that I've received. But then as you play through the game, the level grind the way that it is, gear grind the way that it is, you start getting masterworked weaponry, which I wonder where they got the idea for that. And that will basically be where they have like a lot of the random roll stuff. So they were also explaining like the the progression system, if you will, because it works. Yeah, like I said, it's very similar to Diablo in a lot of ways, because if you go into like the portals and whatnot, you can raise the difficulty on how badly those portals get, and the higher your level, the higher the gear is that you have possibility of receiving. Also think of like Borderlands and how there's legendary equipment there too. But there's several things that you can kind of rely it back to. They're definitely sounding like they're digging into the looter shooter aspect quite a bit more. I'm anxious to see what they do with the collection aspects, because right now they have chests that are spread out along the map, but they're so obvious with where they are that it hurts. So just hope that they change that up a little bit. Anyway. Oh, Vera, that's been going on since the early 90s.
Oh, yeah, that's not just... I mean, to be fair, Activision does...
The rivalry between those two companies is legendary. The fact that they act and kind of are the way that they are is insane. Oh, I totally agree with you. Like, the idea of if there was a legitimate bone in anybody's body at either one of the companies that's like, well, I want to make this like an artsy thing and this is my inspiration for it and so on. I just imagine one of the higher up executives at either one of the companies going, no, they did it this way, do it like this and call it this. I imagine I just imagine that the entire time. Anyway, I think I should probably call it a night here. So
all right. Well, chat, you guys have a great night. We will see you. Hopefully, we'll see you actually sometime early next week.
Early to mid, yeah.
Yeah, to kind of get a chance to kind of giving up with or getting a review of the draw. So, but you guys have a great night. Have a great weekend. We'll see you when we see you. Night.
Bye.